pray together. God, we do want to say thank you for this word that you've given us. Thank you for all of it, all 66 books from Genesis to Revelation, and what you're teaching us in each piece of it. God, I thank you for the great narrative, the story, the arc that there is, that exists throughout all of this. And so even this morning as we study just a snippet of it, God, help us to see it in the grander scope of what it is you're doing and have been doing from the creation of the world. Give us eyes to see, give us ears to hear you this morning through your spirits. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. And you may be seated. As you're seated on the screen right now are scripture that I'm going to use this morning, or hope to. We'll see. We'll see what the Lord does and which direction he takes us, but that's the goal. It's where we plan to go here this morning. We are in the book of Esther. It'll take us 11 weeks, and so we're in week 4 now. It'll take us all the way up until Advent. And we're studying this like a movie. The idea is we're going to situate ourselves in some movie understanding. We've seen the prequel. We've seen all the story of the Old Testament, how it's led us to here. Because now what we find is Jews who are in captivity in Persia. But Persia just captured Babylon, who had captured Assyria, who had captured Judah or Jerusalem. And so now that's where we find ourselves. Random things have happened. We're going to find more about that here in Esther chapter 2. And then we saw the entire scope of the story a couple weeks ago, where we see this ultimately ends in a great celebration of Purim, which is God's deliverance of his people. And then last week we saw in chapter 1, the author Esther is giving us the setting of the empire of Persia. And the empire has all the looks of one with great power and prosperity, a king who seems to be in control and wants to give lavishly to his people. The expectation is if you're in the empire, you receive what the king has. You find power and prosperity and comfort and peace there. But then towards the end of chapter 1, we saw there's some holes in this argument. That in fact, the king actually isn't who he claims to be. The king can't control his emotions. He can't control his liquor. He can't control anything at all. And he offers his wife, the beautiful wife Vashti, to come before his friends and show off her beauty wearing only the royal crown. And she refuses. And the king loses his mind and goes crazy and then sends an edict out, makes a decree that because of her bad behavior, every woman should honor her husband in the empire of Persia. And I'm sure that went over very well in each household when that was decreed. So we pick up here in chapter 2, but I want to root us first in some science. Did you know, have you heard the phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder? You've heard that phrase before? It's historical, it goes even further back than just that phrase. That concept goes pretty far back even to the Greeks. But what's fascinating is that when we see things, the eye of the beholder, we actually see things upside down. Did you know that? Do you know your eyes see things? Raise your hand if you knew that your eyes see things upside down. Well, great. I just learned that recently from my children. And so now I did some research. So let me show you an image of how this works, because I want to know why that happens. So here's how it happens. Our pupils is how light gets in, and then light is transferred into electromagnetism. It's crazy how it happens. But the light comes in, but our pupils are so small, the area where the light can get in. And so when you see a tree, the whole image of the tree can't come in directly and to smack you in the face. So what has to happen is it has to narrow in through that small pinhole of our pupil to be able to see. And in its narrowing, as it gets smaller and smaller, and you see those lines, they begin to switch and to change place. So the top becomes the bottom becomes the top. And the back of your eye is where you actually see that image. And so what we see the world upside down. And then what's crazy is that our brains don't flip the image right side up. At an early age in infancy, thanks to your inner ear, you begin to tell your body what is up and what is down. Inherently, our brains don't do top and bottom, up and down, right and left. They don't do that. We have to tell our brains to do that. Our brains are just receiving information and trying to do something with it. But at an early age, we tell our body how to receive that information. So while we are seeing things upside down, because of our equilibrium, because of our inner ear, our bodies tell our brains, no, that's upside down, this is up, and this is down. So even right now, your eyes are seeing me upside down. But your brain is telling you, no, flip it around so it's right side up. Isn't that crazy? Start looking around the room at things that they're actually upside down the way you see it right now. I've done this for like 2 weeks. It's wild, man. It's crazy. And then a few decades ago, there was an experiment done where a man was given some goggles that actually flipped the world upside down just to see what would happen. And so for the first few days, he struggled trying to walk. He'd walk into buildings, couldn't pour himself a drink, just really, really struggled. But then his brain adapted. His brain told him that what he was seeing that was upside down, that was right side up, is now upside down again, needs to be right side up again. And so he began living life, literally seeing things upside down, but his brain recalibrated the equilibrium to make things right side up. That's crazy, right? That's crazy. So what we learn from that is that the way we see the world is not actually the way we perceive the world. Does that make sense? The way that we see things is actually upside down from the way things actually are. And what we need to do is have our minds renewed to see things the way they actually are. We're going to see here in the second chapter of the book of Esther that there is a way the empire sees the world. There's a way the empire sees the world. What Esther's going to do for us is going to continue to lay the empire, or the world, alongside of the kingdom of God, the way of God. But what's fascinating in Esther is that the name of God is never explicitly mentioned in the book of Esther, which is great training for us, isn't it? Because very rarely does God speak audibly to us. But it's our job to see the world and then see him inside of it. And Esther's going to train us to do that. So we're picking up here in chapter 2, where things have gone a little bit crazy for King Ahasuerus. So here's Esther chapter 2, verse number 1, after these things, which is the understatement of the entire Bible, after these things. Not just after these things, like after chapter 1. There are about 3.5 years between chapter 1 and chapter 2. So after these things, it's like the way your middle school son tells you about his day. You don't get a whole lot of detail. Really monumental things happen that day. You don't get that. So in the midst of all this, remember, Ahasuerus has thrown a 6-month party for all of his officers and all the armies. They come to the citadel, 127 provinces worth, and they all come to the fortress in Susa. It throws a party, but he wants to rally the troops literally because he's about to go invade Greece. Then he throws a week-long party for the people in Susa to tell them, hey, if this goes well, all of this is yours. And then Vashti says no. Ahasuerus loses his mind. And then from there, he makes preparations to invade Greece. And things go well at first. They go well. And Persia wins the Battle of Thermopylae. There's 300 Spartan soldiers led by King Leonidas. Ultimately, Persia would win that. They would take over Athens, and they think they've won the war. And so they bring Persia brings 600 navy ships into the sea. While at the same time, the Greek military puts 200 of their naval ships around the backside of the Persian army. And what should have been an easy defeat for Persia at the Battle of Salamis now turns into a great victory for the country of Greece. And then from there, at Plataea, another loss for Persia happens, losing hundreds and thousands of men. So now, after these things, what has happened after these things is that within less than a handful of years, the great king Xerxes, the king of kings, the king of creation, has lost his wife, has lost a battle that he should have won, and he has now returned home with his tail tucked between his legs, lonely, embarrassed, miserable, and depressed. Now, we learn from the Greek historian Herodotus that throughout this time, after he's left that battle, he has drowned his sorrows in a number of young women, including his niece. He's found himself now completely embarrassed, completely ashamed, guilt-ridden. He's been exposed to be what we knew him to be, what he promoted himself not to be. So he returns home after these things, Esther chapter 2, verse 1. And when the anger of King Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vashti. Not that he ever forgot Vashti. How do you forget Vashti? But now it's like he's reminiscing on times with her. He remembers the picnics in the garden. He remembers her smile, the way she would laugh when he would tell a joke. And he just longs for what he had with Vashti. And we read here that he actually thought about what she had done and what he had decreed against her. It's almost as if he's regretting what happened. He really misses Vashti. But it's okay. He's got some friends who have a great idea. how they're going to solve the problem. The king's young men, his attendants, his team, his lawyers, they attended him, said, hey, here's an idea. Why don't we let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king? You know what you need, king? You need a newer model. That's what you need. You need a younger, newer model. Any parents ever bought a dog that looked like a dog that died to replace the dog that died for your kids? That ever happened for you? Just in the movies? That's what's happening here. His friend's like, we'll just get you another one. We'll get you another Vashti. Let's just do that. And so they have an idea. Let's get a beautiful young virgin. Let's get a bunch of them sought out for the king. Verse 3, and king, why don't you appoint officers in all of your 127 provinces and tell them to bring all the beautiful young virgins to the harem, that's the house of women, in Susa, the citadel, the fortress, under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. So here we go. It's Cinderella, isn't it? Let's get all 127. Let's have each province have a little contest. We'll get the most beautiful young virgin, young woman from each of those provinces, 18 to 20, and then we're going to bring all of them here to Susa. And then we're going to have a Miss Persia contest, and we're going to see which one is worthy of your love. Doesn't that sound great, king? We'll bring them all here, and then you can just have your choice. You can pick. But then watch this. But they say, but also let their cosmetics be given them. So here's where we need to see things the right way. What's happening here, if chapter 1 was the setting development of the movie, chapter 2 is character development. So here's what we're beginning to see. You got to pay attention to the words that are being used here, that the author of Esther is using. They want beautiful young women, and then they're going to give them makeup on top of their beauty. Apparently, this is all about the way of the empire, which is appearance. It's a focus on the way things look. Verse 4, and the young woman who pleases the king, his advisor says, let her be the queen instead of Vashti. Notice, nothing about intelligence or wisdom or leadership. You know how you get to be the queen in the empire? Because you're pretty. That's how you get to be the queen in the empire. But this pleased the king, and he did so. Verse 5, now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai. Hold on. I thought we were talking about beautiful young virgins. Now we're talking about an old Jewish man? What just happened in the story to get us here? So pay attention. When that turn happens, it's an alert. Pay attention to what's happening. The king agrees, let's bring all the women, all the beautiful young women to me. I'm going to choose one to be my queen. And then the scene shifts, and you see this Jewish man named Mordecai in Susa. He's the son of Jair, the son of Shammai, the son of Kish, who's a Benjaminite. We need to pay attention to the phrase, a Jew in Susa. That should catch you off guard. Susa is the citadel, it's the fortress of Persia. And we've talked about this before. It's why this setting matters. It's why all the prequel stuff matters to us. Because there should not be Jews in Susa. This is not normal. Back in 587 BC, the Jewish people were taken into captivity by Babylon. And then in 539 BC, Persia overtakes Babylon, which makes Babylonian captives now Persian captives. But in 538 BC, the king of Persia, King Cyrus, says he hears from the Lord. He's not a follower of Yahweh, but he hears from Yahweh to send the people of God back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. They might worship him there. And so he does. He says, hey, why don't you all go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple? This is 538 BC. So most Jews had made their way back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. So this phrase, there was a Jew in Susa, this citadel, is weird, isn't it? This is not normal. We need to pay attention. Something is shifting underneath what we can see here. But then it gets real weird. Because this Jew's name is Mordecai, which isn't weird until you realize that's not a Jewish name. Mordecai is a Persian name based off of the Persian deity Marduk. There's a Jewish man named after a Persian deity in the Persian capital of Susa. Is it weird yet? Hold on now. What's going on? So on one hand, you've got this beauty contest, which, if I'm being honest, is more than a beauty contest, but that's happening. And then on the other side now, you go to, meanwhile, in Susa, and you see this man who goes by a Persian name, but he's a Jew in the Persian citadel. And then we get Mordecai's family tree, which is weird. Like, why would you give us that information? Why do we need to know? The son of Jair, the son of Shammai, the son of Kish, who was a Benjaminite. Well, here's two things for us to pull from it. First is that Mordecai is a descendant of King Saul, who was the first king of Israel, who had the appearance of a king, but we'd later learn not the substance of a king because of his compromise. Not only that, in the tribe of Benjamin, that's what the tribe of Benjamin does. They're the smallest of all the tribes that continue trying to prove themselves by appearing greater than they are. And the tribe of Benjamin has become known for their compromise. But then verse 6, we get some family history. Kish, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away, which feels like too much information. I don't need to know who the king of Babylon is to understand what's happening here. I don't need to know who the king of Jerusalem was at the time, or Judah. I don't need to know that. But we're told, because here's what's happening. We are 3 generations into Jews living in Persia after they've been allowed to go back to Jerusalem. But we're also being told the name of the Babylonian king while we're in Persia, whose name is Nebuchadnezzar. And that's supposed to, if we would have known the whole story of Scripture, it's supposed to trigger us back to another story of young men and women being taken out of their homeland to the capital of Babylon, and then being selected because of what they have to offer, and they get a seat with the king. This should take us back to the book of Daniel, where we meet Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Hold that in your mind. This is what we're being told is something's happening in Persia that's supposed to look a lot like Babylon. Verse 7. He, Mordecai, was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, which I would have just said his cousin, but that's fine. The daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. Okay, more information. Now we meet a woman who's being raised by Mordecai who has 2 names. Hadassah, but she goes by Esther. Hadassah is a Hebrew name. Esther is a Persian name after the Persian goddess Ishtar, the goddess of fertility. She's not being raised by her mom and dad. We don't know what happened. We just know she's not being raised by them. They probably had passed, and now she's been adopted by her cousin, who comes from a lineage of compromise. And now he no longer calls her Hadassah, he calls her Esther. She's an orphan being raised. But now watch how she is described. The young woman had a beautiful figure, which means exactly what you think it means, and was lovely to look at. Why is she being described in this way? Anytime characters in the Bible are being described, you need to pay attention. She's being described in the language of the empire. She's beautiful. It's a beautiful form, and she is lovely to look at. And when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. It's interesting, isn't it, that we don't get Mordecai's Hebrew name, but we get Esther's Hebrew name. So we need to hold these, as we keep reading, hold this tension, because we're getting a lot of questions now. What we're learning, though, is that the way of the empire is all about appearance, not substance. We see it with Ahasuerus. We saw it with him and Vashti. We saw it in his battles against Greece. What it looks like is not actually what it is. And now, in the empire, we see a Hebrew man who does not go by his Hebrew name, but his Persian name, raising a Hebrew girl, not under her Hebrew name, but her Persian name. And she is beautiful, which the Persians love that about her. Verse 8. So now it all comes back together. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women gathered in Susa, the citadel, in the custody of Haggai, Esther also was taken to the king's palace and put in custody of Haggai, who had charge of the women. Uh-oh. Do you feel it yet? Okay. There's a Jewish girl, all wrapped up in with 126 other young, beautiful women to be paraded in front of the king. So listen, Before we get into it, you need to know this is going to be rated R at this point. It's gross what's about to happen. You've got young women who have been taken from their homeland to come into the citadel to be paraded in front of the king for their beauty. Not just that. They're each going to get one night in the bed with the king. Do I need to say more? And their future rests on not only their beauty, but their performance. We okay? That's what's happening. And we've got a Jewish girl who no longer goes by her Jewish name, no longer raised by her Hebrew parents, but now raised by her Hebrew turned Persian cousin named Mordecai, and she's been grouped in with it. But I want you to remember the context. We're talking arranged marriages. And every young girl would love the idea of being the queen. If you're going to be arranged anyway, why not be arranged with the king? You know what I'm saying? And so now these 127 young women have a chance to be arranged with the king. And so while for us, we're like, it sounds awful. I don't know. Because parents are walking alongside. They're promoting this. This is something they want to happen. They want to see their daughter come to marry the king. It's in an empire that's obsessed with beauty. It's a compliment to be called beautiful. And to be the most beautiful in your province, then to be the most beautiful in the Persian Empire, made of 50 million people, 44% of the world's population at the time. It is a gift to be chosen because of your beauty. And now we've seen Mordecai, we've seen the women. Now the camera shifts to verse 9. This young woman Esther pleased Haggai and won his favor. Now Esther has the inside track. The talent scout sees something in Esther. I like this one. Let's get her where she needs to be. The king's going to love this one. She is his type. Won the favor of the eunuch who's in charge of the women. And Haggai quickly provided her with her cosmetics. So now just for her portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women, now she gets a team of people to make her more beautiful from the king's palace. And then he advanced her and these 7 women to the best place in the harem. Haggai is setting up Esther to win. But we need to be reading between the lines here. Remember, we've been cued into the story of Daniel in Babylon earlier with the name of Nebuchadnezzar. So let me read you Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. I want you to just lay them side by side. See if you can pick up some distinctions and some similarities. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Sound familiar, 3rd year of the reign? Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he placed his vessels in the treasury of his God. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, sound familiar? To bring some of the people of Israel, both the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance, skillful in wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stay in the king's palace and to teach them literature and the language of the Chaldeans. So now, if beauty, appearance, is the aim of the Persian Empire, wisdom and intelligence are the aim of the Babylonian Empire. Whatever the empire values is what they're looking for. So in Persia, it's beautiful. In Babylon, it's intelligence. And they found some guys who are intelligent. And they bring him with a eunuch. The eunuch brings them to the king. He's going to teach them, going to immerse them in the language and literature. He's going to give them cosmetics of the Babylonian Empire. And the king, verse 5, assigned them a daily portion of the food the king ate and the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years. At the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah, all Hebrew names. But the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar. Hananiah he called Shadrach. Mishael he called Meshach. And Azariah he called Abednego. Hebrews with Babylonian names. But look at verse 8. Here's the difference. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. We've been given some hyperlinks to link Esther and Daniel. And we see a lot of similarities. Here's what we see that is different. Esther participates in the empire. Daniel does not. Daniel said, I can't eat it. I'm not going to do it. And he asks for the eunuch. And the eunuch gives him favor. Okay, I'll give you. What is it that you want? And he's like, well, I'd like to do the Daniel fast for 21 days to start the year, please. He's like, my whole church is doing it, so I feel like I should too. And so he does. But Esther gives herself into what's being asked for. We got to hold this with us now. It's going to be so important as we continue this story. She's fully adopted the way of the Persians. Esther chapter 2, verse 10, you see, she had not made known her people or her kindred. But Daniel did. Esther has not. Why? Because Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. Uh-oh. Okay. Are we getting a picture of Mordecai? Mordecai from the tribe of Benjamin and the lineage of Saul, known for their compromise, raised by a father and a grandfather and a great-grandfather who could have gone back to Jerusalem but chose the comfort of Persia instead, now goes by his Persian name after the Persian god Marduk, and now takes under his wing his cousin with a Hebrew name, but now calls her by her Persian name, Esther, and now sees her as beautiful and says, hey, you can't tell anybody that you're a Jew. And now it's why? Why? And initially, like, well, because they're captive, so they're going to be killed if they admit that they're Jews. But that's not the truth historically. In fact, Persia loves Jews. Persia thinks they should go back and build the temple. Persia is known for their tolerance. They love all the different cultures, the melting pot, the diversity. They love everything about other cultures inside of Persia. So it's not that. Well, then what is it? It's that Mordecai knows the king wants a Persian queen, and if she admits she's a Jew, she won't win. Which means Mordecai wants the way of the empire for Esther. We're going to learn here that Esther also wants the way of the empire for her. But we're left with some questions, aren't we? Is Mordecai a good guy or a bad guy? What about Esther? Is she good or is she bad? What about Ahasuerus? You feel bad for him a little bit, don't you? Is he good or is he bad? What we need to see is that in an empire consumed with appearance, Mordecai and Esther are buying in. They're buying in. Verse 11, and every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. This is interesting, isn't it? Stalkerish, but interesting. Is he watching out for her? Does he want to protect her? Is he cheering her on? Here's what I think. He's making sure she hasn't told anybody she's a Jew yet. Are we still on track, Esther? Are we good? Remember what I told you. From this point forward, you are Esther. That's who you are. Now, when the turn came for each young woman to go into King Ahasuerus, which is a biblical way of saying to go sleep with King Ahasuerus, after being 12 months under the regulations for the women, so just with the regular period of beautifying, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with spices and ointments for women. Now, any husband who's had to wait on his wife to get ready for dinner understands what's happening in verse 12. A year. So what's happening in this year? What's happening is assimilation. The women are being formed into the desires of the king. The king has a type. And the women are being formed into the type. The empire has preferences, and so does the king. And so they are living in the appearance that they're looking for. When the young woman that went into the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening, she'd go in. In the morning, the walk of shame, she would return to the second harem in custody of Shazgaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. The second harem has concubines. So they'd be in the holding pen with Haggai. They get a chance one night with the king, 127 of them, 127 straight nights with the king. And then from there, in the next morning, they would go to another place, which is where they would keep all the concubines. So, well, what's a concubine? Well, a concubine is a woman that the king tried out and then decided wasn't going to make it, but he still owned her. And so she would exist purely for his pleasure. She would have no seat at the table, no access to the throne, but when he wanted her, he would call for her. What we're learning is that if the woman doesn't become queen, she is condemned to a life of being a concubine, which means no husband, no family, no future. So now you're like, gosh, man, Esther has to win, doesn't she? Because that sounds worse than being with the king. This is the empire. Everything is appearance and performance. But when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, well, why? Why do we need to know her dad's name? It's not important So you understand this. What the author's trying to remind us is she's a Jew, you remember? And that Abihail, you think that's a Persian name or a Hebrew name? That's a Hebrew name, which tells us she probably wasn't raised in a household that exemplified or adored the Persian Empire. So she came under the custody of Mordecai, under the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his own daughter. It's her turn to go into the king, and she asked for nothing except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the women, had advised. So now she's like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Haggai, what is the king like? What is he like? Which means she wants to win. She's in. Esther was winning favor in all the eyes of all who saw her. And when Esther was taken into King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, 4 years after he lets go of Queen Vashti, the king loved Esther more than all the women. Now read loved gently. That's not like that. She loved what he did for her, what she did for him. He loved her beauty, and he loved her performance. She was the best, man. She was the best at it. And she won grace and favor in his sight and more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown on her head. Oh, that takes us back, doesn't it? And he made her queen instead of Vashti. She won. She played the Persian game, and she got everything she was after. And then the king throws a great feast. Man, he loves a party. He threw a feast for all his officials and servants, and he called it Esther's feast. And then he granted a remission of taxes to the provinces and gave gifts with royal generosity. I want a remission of my property taxes. If we could do that, that would be great. Amen. And her victory now, so pay attention. What's happening is that the victory of Esther is a victory for Persia. It's not just good for her. This is good for everyone that she's pretty. It's good for everyone that she performed. Look at what her appearance has done for Persia. He's taken away their taxes. He's given them gifts with royal generosity. So now what we see is that not only is appearance idolized in the empire, it's rewarded. And it's emphasized here that appearance is good for everyone. Beauty is good for everyone. Gosh, man, what do you do with all that? What do we do with this? Here's where I think we need to land today. I want to lay beside the empire and the kingdom. The empire looks at appearance while the kingdom looks for substance. The empire is obsessed with how things look. The kingdom is looking for substance behind the appearance. Now, this is not a new thing in Esther. This battle between substance and appearance has been the battle in humanity since literally the beginning of time. God creates the world, Genesis 1 and 2, everything is as it should be. He calls it good. On the 6th day, he calls it very good because it's on that day he created man and woman, and he tells them, hey, you can have whatever you want in this garden, eat whatever you want. I'm just asking you not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's in the middle of the garden. Don't eat from that, because if you do, you'll die. We read in Genesis 3 that a serpent makes his way into the garden and tells Eve, the woman, hey, why don't you eat some of this? Did he tell you not to eat from any tree? She said, no, he just told me I can't eat from that tree. And the serpent's like, well, listen, because he knows if you do that, your eyes are going to be open. You're going to see things the way he does, and he's holding out on you. Now look at this in verse 6. But when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was a delight to the eyes, the tree was to be desired to make her wise. You see it, the appearance. The serpent is always going to play on our appearance. Look at it, look at it, look at it. Don't you want it? Look at it. Don't you want it? And she, for the first time, sees its beauty. She took of its fruit and ate. She gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. The way of the serpent is always through appearance. And then that continues to the Old Testament, even to the Israelites. The Israelites want a king. I told you this before, but God doesn't want to give them a king. Finally, he gives in and gives them a king. And so they find a man whose name is Saul. And I want you to see how Saul is described in 1 Samuel chapter 9. There was a man of Benjamin, that sounds familiar. His name was Kish, that sounds familiar. The son of Abiel, the son of Zerah, the son of Bacharath, the son of Aphiah, a Benjaminite, a man of wealth. And he had a son. The rich man had a son whose name was Saul. Look how he's described, a handsome young man. There was not a man among the people of Israel more handsome than he. From his shoulders upward, he was taller than any of the people. He looks the part. People are drawn to him. What we'd learn over not too long of a period of time is that although he had the appearance of a king, he never had the substance of a king. And he compromised, and he gave in, and he had to be succeeded by another king, King David. So when the prophet Samuel is now looking for a new king, he finds a family of young men, and he thinks it's the oldest because he's the tallest, he's strapping, he's good looking. That's not who God has in mind. Here's 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7. The Lord said to Samuel, "No, listen, don't look at his appearance or on the height of his stature." We made that mistake with Saul, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as a man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. The empire looks to appearance. The kingdom looks to substance. So already you're like, oh, I know where we're going with this. I know. You can't trust pretty people. I know where we're going. Which is why I'm your pastor. So you can trust me. It'll be fine. I know, like, beauty's only skin deep. Like, if I'm going to date somebody, I got to look at their heart. Yes, all those things are really, really good things for you to know. Except you can't trust pretty people. You can trust some pretty people. But here's what I think is happening deep here underneath the surface. There's a trickle down to the empire's obsession with appearance. Because if appearance is king, then substance doesn't matter. Which means to be successful in the empire, I just have to have appearance. I just have to look successful. Which means the focus is on how I look, not on who I am. Which makes appearance over substance and surface over soul. So, in the empire, we focus on exteriors and we play the game, we look the part, while our souls are rotting and dying. So if chapter 1 was about the empire and the kingdom, I think chapter 2 is what happens when the empire makes its way into the kingdom. What happens when you're not just living in the empire, but the empire is living in you? What happens then? What happens is this obsession with performance. So in the church, it looks like an obsession and a focus on behavior and church attendance. It looks like doing the right things to please the right people, wearing the right things to please the right people. In our culture, we call that legalism. Here's the danger of legalism. That legalism wants cosmetics over confession. When the empire makes its way into the kingdom, it makes people hide who they are to be who everybody else wants them to be. And it means we can't confess our brokenness and can't confess our sin. When the empire makes its way into the kingdom, there's no room for failure. But we all fail, don't we? Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. There's no one good, no, not one. So what do you do if the empire wants appearance, but there's no room for confession? Well, we pretend, and we hide, and we manipulate. And we start going by other names, and we start looking like other people. Failure is not an option in the empire. There's no room for struggle. There's no room for doubt. So we put on a good face, and we play the game. I'm good, brother. How are you? And we force down our shame. We lie to other people and to ourselves. We hide who we really are to promote who the empire wants us to be. But there's another layer here that I think is really disconcerting. Esther wasn't always like the empire. Remember, she used to be Hadassah. Both of those names have to do with beauty. She was born beautiful. Something happened with the empire. She was the daughter of Abihail, but when she lost her parents and became raised by Mordecai, whose lineage connects him to a history of appearance and compromise. And Mordecai told Hadassah who she is now. No, you're not Hadassah, you are Esther, because that's the only way to find success in the empire. And then he tells her, don't tell anybody. It gets worse. Here's verse 20 of chapter 2. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people, as Mordecai had commanded her, For Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. See, Mordecai was raised by men and women who were raised by men and women who were raised by men and women who chose the comfort of Persia over the calling of Jerusalem. And generations of assimilation had led a beautiful young girl to the bed of the king in Persia. What I'm saying is, this is learned behavior, which should begin to prick the hearts of those of us who have influence over younger people. Parents and grandparents and teachers and coaches and small group leaders and pastors and youth pastors and children's volunteers. At a very early age, we learn to make sense of the upside down way that we see the world biologically. It's how we form a worldview, our view of the world. And in that sense, how we view the world is often found by those who influence us. We see the world the way our parents saw the world, which is the way their parents saw the world, which is the way their parents saw the world. The trickle down here is that Esther is just making sense of the world the way she was taught to. It's led her to one night in the king's bedroom. Now, whether she was taught that explicitly or she learned that by watching their behavior, it doesn't matter. She learned something, that the way of the empire is greater than the way of the kingdom. Parents and grandparents, older siblings, are you walking in the way of the kingdom or in the way of the empire? Because I'm telling you, generations from now, it will lead to a young girl in the bedroom of the king. What do we do? What does your calendar say? Are you kingdom or empire? What does the music you listen to say? What do the things you watch say? What do your finances say? What are the expectations you have of your kids say to them? Compromise happens where cosmetics are preferred over confession. And listen, I'm not an expert, but I think this begins at home. If your home is a place of shame and guilt for your kids, you can expect them in generations to be one night with the king. If it's all about how they make you look and you're embarrassed and you're ashamed, or every time they come home from school, the first thing you're on them about is a missing assignment, I just think we're not allowing them to confess. We're allowing empire to influence the kingdom in our home. Husbands and wives, can they? Esther ends up in the bed of the king after generations of compromise and choosing Persia over Jerusalem because they wanted comfort over calling. Mom and dad, are you allowing your kids to walk in calling even if it scares the mess out of you? Because the world says, no, you need to have this and that and do this. But what if they're called to be a missionary? What do you do with that? What if they're called to be a pastor? What do you do with that? Well, the way of the empire says, no, we can't do that. But the way of kingdom says, it's all yours, Lord. You're the king. See, the way of the kingdom is rooted in confession. It's honest assessments of who we are. It's not that things aren't beautiful. It's that our minds have to be renewed to see the beauty in the upside down. That's what has to happen. But it's the way of our king. This is Isaiah chapter 53 as we wrap up. Let me just show you that our kingdom is shaped by the king. Isaiah 53:2. This is a prophecy about Jesus. He grew up before him like a young plant and like a root out of dry ground. Watch what it says about Jesus. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. The empire misses the king. The way of the empire, the eyes of the empire will always miss King Jesus because he doesn't look like a king. He doesn't look like what you're looking for. And if your heart and mindset is wrapped up in empire, in financial success, and in political success, you will miss the king every time. Because he looks upside down to you. No, I can't be him. Because he wouldn't allow, this wouldn't happen. We've missed him because we've allowed empire into the kingdom. So what is the way out? I think the way out is to choose substance over appearance, which means we have to slow down. We have to slow down. It changes the way we see people. What's underneath them. I know you see the appearance and you see hair color or you see eye color and you see tattoos, whatever it is you see, and you make a judgment. But the way of the kingdom says, no, what's underneath the appearance? What's underneath that? Have a spouse who's struggling, what's underneath that? We choose substance over appearance, and I think we choose confession over cosmetics. If you're still worried about what you look like to people, then you're living under empire, not kingdom. If you won't confess something because of the way it makes you look before other people, that's empire language, not kingdom language. And parents, that came from somewhere. It came from somewhere. Maybe it came from your house, maybe it came from a church culture. The way of the kingdom is confession. It's the only way. It's the only way forward. Because what confession allows us to do is to reorient what looks upside down to be right side up. Continue in Isaiah 53, what we learn about this king who looked nothing like a king is that he was pierced for our transgressions. On his body, the penalty of our sin. Christianity as a whole screams at us to be people of confession. The cross itself allows you to be a person of confession. Because the cross is there because we needed it. The cross is there because we're broken and jacked up. The cross is there because we're sinners. If we're perfect, why a cross? But the cross compels us to confess. So as Brandon plays, I'm just going to give us a few minutes now to just confess. To just be honest. Stop trying to look the part. Stop trying to play the game. That's empire in kingdom. Take a few, you can use the altar if you need to. If you need to confess to a friend, and it looks like an apology, it looks like an asking of forgiveness, but it's just an honest assessment of actually who we are, what's underneath it. See, this obsession with appearance is what's leading you to be anxious and depressed. See, God's not looking at the outward. He's looking at your heart. And he's not surprised by it. So maybe today you've lived your life in the empire. You've never actually had a different name. This is who you are. Well, the invitation today is that there's a better way than empire. There's a kingdom way. And the kingdom way isn't concerned about appearance. It's actually concerned about your heart. And the king of this kingdom says, tell me. He doesn't make judgments based on appearance. He makes judgments based on a broken and a contrite heart. That's how he makes judgments. Maybe today I just want to invite you to confess him, to confess sin to him, confess your brokenness and wandering and anxiety and fear to him. That the king of this kingdom might actually meet you there. And you'll get more than one night with him. You'll get an eternity with the king of the kingdom. So God, would you help us to be people of confession, people who are actually honest? And may that kind of a culture, that kind of a safety where we can be honest, we can confess, we can wrestle and doubt and struggle and have questions. We can question you, we can doubt you, that you've invited us into an honest journey with you. But in an empire that's so consumed with appearance, God, it's infiltrated into many of our hearts. and our souls are rotting, but the surface looks clean. So God, I'm asking today you do the work to push beyond appearance to get into the substance of who we are, and that we'd be a people who welcome confession, people of kingdom and not empire. It's in Jesus' name I pray.